Welcome to episode 43 of the Fitasylum podcast. Today we are joined by Jacob of Kane Training. Jacob, welcome and thank you for jumping on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No worries. I'm very excited for this podcast. I said today to Sinead, this is probably the one I was most excited to record. Obviously, I don't know if you know, but we record 4 or 5 in one day. And you always have that feeling that a guest is going to bring such a cool podcast. And it's actually something our directors have said to us. We'd love to get a gym owner on who's currently owns a gym, and obviously, thank you for taking the time out of such a busy schedule.
No, not at all. Happy to be
here. Thank you very much. Do you want to give a shout out to your Instagram of where people can find your personal and your gym account?
Yeah, so my Instagram is Jacob KW, and the gym Instagram is Kane Training, all one word, quite easy to find. Probably best just going straight to Kane Training, finding us on there. You can see all the stuff that we're getting up to in and out of the gym. Drop us a follow if you want to come down and try us. We're down in Preston, but yeah, more than welcome to have you.
The most aesthetic gym I've ever been to, and you said in and out of the gym there, and Jacob's referring to. They do a lot outside of the gym, community side of stuff. They do a lot of fun stuff, go to a lot of comps. And if you want to follow him personally, he's always competing. It's really good to see someone competing at a really high level. Probably doesn't acknowledge it's a high level, but it really is a high level. And it's the standard in that gym is really high level as well, would you say?
Yeah, I'd say generally in terms of, we try and make it hold a high standard in terms of kind of like operating procedures, the aesthetic, etc., but also kind of accept members from all levels, if you will. Generally speaking, I would say that we are like a relatively fit gym as a whole, but I would say that we've got kind of people of all abilities, all ages and stuff like that. And my job as a coach, I think I'm doing a good job, and the other coaches I think would agree that doesn't matter what level you come in at, is that ultimately if you're completely brand new to it, but you're on a rig station next to somebody who's been doing it for a long time, that it doesn't matter. I should be able to scale that workout appropriately so that you two both get the same stimulus and the same great experience regardless.
Yeah, and I think that shows your knowledge and coaching skills very well, because I came in March of this year, or it might have been Feb, and I'd just come back from an LCL injury, really bad one, and you just really easily, all the coaches were just so welcoming and found it really easy to regress every exercise, make sure that they could scale anything I needed to, take it at my own pace. Really, really good information and fantastic coaching. I tried 4 or 5 CrossFit style gyms in 2022 and the start of 2023, and you guys were just head and shoulders above everyone else. And I'll tell you why. The programming, it's periodized. You can see it on the app. Absolutely excellent. The service is just unmatched. The equipment, like you've got full of Row equipment, Alico, just top quality equipment. And then the coaching is absolutely excellent. I went to other gyms and they were like very, very unsure on how to deal with my injury, but 2, also just like how to start with beginners. And you guys just integrate them so well. Like, the other day someone joined the class that I was on at 7 and you were like, guys, say welcome, and like you try and chat to him because I received such a warm welcome, so you want to give him such a warm welcome.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a big thing when people join a new gym. It can be hard, especially in the kind of the small PT gym type space, if you will, or CrossFit gyms, etc., functional fitness gyms. There's more and more popping up now, and it can be quite hard. You're in that kind of micro gym space of 100 to 200 members, and you do ultimately have kind of little groups develop, people get to know one another and whatnot. So coming into that space I think can be quite intimidating for people. So I try and kind of like make it my job right from the off to say, right, okay, let's try and, if such a body usually likes to go in a pair with such a body, then try and say, right, okay, no, you go with you today, kind of keep breaking it up and try and get everybody to be friends with everybody and not just to have these kind of little cliques developing within the group. So hopefully new people do then start to feel welcome and kind of put them in with somebody who's in a pair, say for example, with somebody who's been there for a little while, and that get kind of straight away first session and gets them nice and integrated and gets them feeling welcome.
No, it was very welcoming when I first joined, and it's still welcoming today. And like even when I meet new people, say if you do like a 5 o'clock class, you've probably never seen them. I've never seen them because I do 7 usually, So it's really fun. But you get some members. We mentioned him off podcast, but like Mali he does different classes. Yeah, I feel like he speaks to everyone just so well, so lovely. Like he was really nice to me when I first started. And then we also had like two other students who used to be Fitasylum students who were there, which was really nice. And it was funny because Stacey on the course came, and I was looking at Kane at the time, and I said, "Oh, I'm going to this gym. I highly recommend. Like, look how cool it looks and stuff." And look how like aesthetic it is. Look at the programming, all that sort of stuff. And she actually came and tried it for the first time, and now she's like a staple, isn't she?
Yeah, she's there. Well,
all the time.
Yeah, a good few times a week now, Stacey. Yeah, really lovely. Brings her, her daughter down sometimes on the later ones when it's not quite as busy. Just sits in reception. We try and kind of be as accommodating as possible. I mean, obviously, if the gym's like mega full, it's not always possible. But I always just say that's the part of the benefit of owning a micro gym compared to like a big box gym where there's kind of certain processes and procedures. Being a macro gym owner and an operator, you can have a bit more flexibility and a bit more freedom where you've got that personal one-to-one connection with members where if they say, "Oh, I'm stuck for childcare tonight, can my little one come and just sit in reception," say for example, whilst we crack on, then you're a lot more accommodating and able to do that and help out. And I think that helps to kind of build that sense of like trust and community as well.
That's a huge benefit of going to Kane Training, like the community, the trust. It's just lovely. And like Heidi comes and she sits there, and what a great example that's setting to her for like later down the line of how important her 100%. Mum takes her fitness and stuff like that, which I think that's just so cool.
Yeah, I think that's, sorry to interrupt, I think that's invaluable for kids is to, I think, I'm not lucky enough to have any kids just yet, but I think that's a big thing I've always kind of heard from people that I looked up to is that kids ultimately do as they see and not what they're told to do, if that makes sense. So if they see you as a parent, getting after it every day, kind of putting in the work, getting after it, training, working hard in whatever it is that you're doing, then they're going to be more likely to follow that than just if you are trying to tell them, "Oh, you need to be exercising, you need to keep healthy, you need to do X, Y, and Z," but then you're not backing it up with your own behaviour.
Mate, leads me on to a really funny like story that happened when I was at your gym, and like it's very community based, very family based, and this man asked me, he was like straight away, I'd never seen him in the sessions before, and he was like, "How are you finding the gym?" And he was like really pressing me on it, and I was like, "Yeah, I love it." Like I said, actually, I've just left a review last month. He's like, "Yeah, I love it." He said like my other son comes here as well, and obviously like his wife was training there, and then it turns out it was your dad. And it was so funny, but he's so proud. He's like really wanted to make sure everyone was enjoying the service, and I only realised it was your dad when you were like, "If you've got any problems with the floor, my dad fit it, so go and speak to him." It was just so lovely. And like I think a couple of weeks before, your brother had come and trained in a session. So that's what he means by family community. It's if your family trust it, then obviously you're providing such a good service.
100%.
And it's just so cool. It's just so lovely. And your dad was like really inspiring because he was telling me like he does manifesting at night. Is that true? And like they go through gratitude and they all sit down together. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, he's come a long way. My dad, I think, he's grown a lot as a person. I think so. He does like like you say, the manifestation stuff. He does that with my little sister and Aya. Like they'll say what they're grateful for and what the he'll say, I can't remember it exactly off the top of my head, but say that you're loved, you're beautiful. He
was telling me, I was like
this, that, and the other with her before bed, and I think that sort of thing. I mean, it speaks volumes. She's turned into a really great young girl. I mean, she's only 11, but still like really a really nice girl and comes across really well in public. And she's grown into a great young woman, but whether that's helped or not, who knows, but I can't imagine it's going to
it's going to be amazing, and it's teaching her, like you said, really good like values to start with. And it was just so he like ran me through his whole day. He sets off to Manchester at like 5 in the morning.
He'll talk to anybody,
and he's just so lovely to have in the gym though, isn't he?
It's hard to get anything done when he's around though, so sometimes I'm like, right, come on, back to it, what we're talking about.
But yeah, I mean, he was just looking at you like so proud. He's like, "Oh, look how good he is at this. Oh, he's really good." And like, and I didn't know, but like he was telling me like how you, Dom, and Mally are really good friends and stuff, which was really nice because Dom's one of the other coaches, and I didn't know that, and he's really good coach. Like I remember he was teaching me on Thursday nights, and I'm terrible at gymnastics, and he was just so patient with me because I must have been awful and dreadful. I still am, but they're really patient, and you've got like different coaches that do different things, and I really enjoy that. And it's good that there's other like personalities that you can go in. And I remember like next time I saw him, I was like, "Oh, how are you doing?" And it's really good because you kind of build a relationship with those people where like now every time I come in I say hi to Sheena and she's telling me about her kids, and it's just really nice, isn't it? Like it's just such a good environment. And when you first started off, or like open the gym. Is that what you envisaged, or has that grown organically, naturally, or have you really had to put that culture in place?
Look, I mean, every gym, especially kind of micro gym owner in the world, thinks that their community is the best community. So, you know, I'm not going to try and say that, oh, you know, we're the best and this, that, and the other, because I think everybody says that. And ultimately, from what I've seen and what I've heard, I think when you get 100 or so, you know, people together, look, generally speaking, if you're nice to people, people will be nice to you.
Yeah.
But I do think, you know, CrossFit, functional fitness in and of itself is quite self-selecting, in that you're generally not going to get kind of woe is me, you know, kind of like moany type people, if you will, which we like to say, I mean, it's not my quote, but effort is the only currency. So it's kind of like, if you're willing to show up, work hard, put the graft in and not moan about it, then we'll have you. We're not bothered about how fit you are. We don't care about whether you know, how many muscle ups you can do or how strong you are or anything like that. Not bothered. If you're willing to show up, put a graft in, work hard and be nice to people, then ultimately, you know, we'll have you. And I think that in and of itself, then that kind of, and I make that apparent to new people. So I think they kind of like, it's almost like all right, okay, well, you know, the coach and owners kind of saying that, then, you know, maybe makes people question, am I that type of person? And I think generally, you know, if you're seeking out CrossFit and that type of training, you kind of generally know, kind of have an idea of what it entails. Then if you're somebody who seeks out hard things, then I think ultimately you're going to be a certain type of person that probably fits in a lot with the other people that we have at the gym. So I think generally over time, I didn't necessarily set out to have like it wasn't necessarily my number one thing of like, oh, I want a community that everyone's going to be nice to each other and this, that and the other. I just think that's kind of like the standard. Do you know what I mean? I don't think it's necessarily something you need to set out for. It just, people should just be nice and in general. And you get a group with those same values together and it just kind of happens naturally.
And is that because you surround yourself with those people? Because that's your kind of lifestyle? Yeah,
I try to. I think, you know, if you can be to others how you want people to be to you, and just, I don't know, I don't think it should be that difficult to just be a decent person.
I don't think it's difficult.
Be a decent person yourself, and generally you'll attract that behaviour yourself. You know, listen first, try and hear what people's problems are, hear what people have got going on in their life, and show genuine interest, and generally people will do the same back to you. For me, I don't know maybe how it comes across, but I think it shouldn't be that difficult. Just be a decent human.
But it probably is for some people. I mean,
yeah.
You showed great empathy last week by not making us run in the ice and cold.
That was
I was very thankful.
That was a little bit of a probably more of a health and safety thing than anything else. But
No, but you were always so accommodating as well. So like, we had a couple of students that needed assessing. Yeah, sure, Dad, no worries. I had a client that I needed to take up there for his 1 rep max testing because his other gym didn't like me coming in as a non-PT who's kind of like, they were like, oh, it's going to upset our other PTs, so that was great. And then obviously we brought Tim Marner up when he wanted to film a episode for his channel. So, you know, so accommodating and like just a great space. Mm-hmm. And when you set out your space, like you started off in a smaller unit, is that correct?
Yeah, so I basically set out on my own, probably not the best timing. It was in 2020, I think August of 2020, I took out the first lease on the small unit. Very small, about 6.5 by 5 meters were like the main kind of working space, maybe if that. And I just had kind of like from the start, like one small rig and then kind of like one of each piece of cardio equipment that's kind of standard within CrossFit, ski erg, row, assault bike, etc. Had a GHD for core and trunk work, and like I say, just a rig, set of dumbbells and plates, etc. Just kind of the basics. Started off there, 2020, had a 2-year lease on that. And then across that 2 years, started off just with like one-to-one PT for the first year, obviously on and off due to COVID and lockdown and whatnot, and getting short and opening up.
How did you find that? Was it tough?
Yeah, it was tough, but I think ultimately you just had to just work with what you had. And I think as long as, you know, thankfully, just keeping your overheads down as much as possible, and just, I think it was hard, but I don't know, I think it helped that during that time, because everything else was closed, you didn't have anything to spend
your money on
anyway. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, yeah, you might not have been able to earn quite as much, but also there was nothing to spend on either. You know, you spend a lot more time at home, and I think it was helped kind of find out what really matters, etc. But yeah, just kind of doubled down. As long as I could cover the rent, cover my mortgage at home and whatnot, then that was enough, and that was fine. But yeah, it was, I mean, by the time I'd opened it, we'd already had the kind of main lockdown that earlier on.
Yeah.
One, it was only kind of, I think it was Christmas sort of time-ish. I think I think was it around Christmas of 2020, went into another month or two of lockdown.
Yeah, it was, I think.
And then I think there was a period where you're allowed to one-to-one PT, but not group classes, etc. So yeah, it affected us, but only minorly. And in the meantime, I just did I did mostly Zoom PTs and stuff, and I had clients that kind of kept me going.
And that's like a real big
groups.
like well done to you, because you just got on with it. You know,
Yeah,
I know
exactly,
a lot of gym owners really struggled and complained
Yeah.
about it, and they probably spent more time complaining than just going.
Didn't do it.
Just
Yeah,
get
I
on
mean,
with it.
I'm very much like, look, don't get me wrong. When something like that happens, obviously it's difficult, but I'm a big advocate of like moaning about a problem isn't going to fix the problem.
No.
So I think it's just kind of like, right, well, what can we do about it? You know, you fed up for a day or so, and then you kind of pick yourself up and then be like, right, okay, right, what can we do, if you will? And I think that's how you've got to approach almost, you know, as many problems as you can in life, is turn around and think, right, okay, well, X has happened, what can we do about it to actually move forward? And,
I was going to say, that's your mindset
of
of a lot of things, isn't it? Like,
Yeah,
you hurt your back
definitely,
recently, and every day you're like, I've done this, because this is what I can do.
What can I do, if that makes sense? And sometimes, you know, you're constantly pushing up against that kind of like, you know, barrier of like, right, okay, I can do this. Oh, no, I can't do that. And then you hurt yourself.
You found the boundary.
You know, exactly, found the boundary. So I know, right, okay, I can do X, Y, and Z. And you just kind of learn. But yeah, sorry, so... that was throughout COVID. First year, just one-to-one PT.
Nice.
And then we started implementing kind of like very small like group classes, like boot camp. Well, I wouldn't even call it a boot camp. I don't even know what the difference between a boot camp and a group class is.
I just think it's a name.
Yeah. But we just started doing like a small Saturday class up to like 6 people, circuits essentially, because we couldn't do much else in the space that we had. All the time, I'm gradually just kind of like reinvesting in equipment. So any sort of excess profit we had at the end of the month, I was always kind of like just gradually buying new equipment bit by bit. And then throughout that second year, the classes actually started to become a bit more popular. So I think at first we added an extra 2 on maybe a Tuesday and a Thursday. So I think it was Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So it was very gradual. It's like I didn't necessarily like go from nothing to opening with like a 30 class a week class schedule, because I'm trying to compete with a major gym, because we didn't have the well, not even just the resources, but there's no point having 30 classes a week that you're not going to fill, 100%. If you will. I wanted to kind of like grow in line with demand, if that makes sense. So as soon as there was the demand for more classes, that's when I would put them on. And gradually it became to like an every night thing. Nice. And then it was 2 a night. And then before you know it, I think it was like we did a 5 and a 6 p.m. class. By the time I finished in the small space, it was 5 and a 6 p.m. class Monday to Friday. And then a couple on a Saturday morning, and then from there, that was by which point I'd already kind of started looking at the bigger space just over the way as like a full kind of barn conversion project, and that's kind of what led us to where we are now.
It's a big space, and just touching back on the small groups and growing with demand, that's exactly how I did it with like the powerlifting group I was working with. So I basically opened up 4 spaces. We did 2 hours on a Monday night, Wednesday night, and a Saturday morning. It worked really well, and then once those 4 spaces were kind of solid, I started building a waiting list. When I got 4 people on the waiting list, I actually said, do you want to do Tuesday, Thursday, and we do a big group session on Saturday? And it worked great.
Yeah.
And that's how I ran it, and then that's the kind of like how I started my group stuff. And then obviously from that, then went, right, I need to open a gym now, because we started to get really busy. I was doing one-to-ones in the day, doing groups in the evening. It was really busy. Going back to yourself, like, is that how you decided you wanted to rent a little small unit? Did you go, actually my PT is rammed?
I think I was fairly busy. I can't think exactly. I think for me the goal was always to do my own thing, if
really,
that makes sense. Yeah. So like I've never, I've always I don't even know when it started really, but I've always kind of wanted to, be a business owner, etc. At first it was within, which we can touch upon later, but was going to be within kind of the fashion space. That was, what my degree was in. And then when I started doing the personal training, I think, previous employers, they kind of knew all along, and, that was always something that was going to be of interest to me, was to have my own space. So I think when it got to the point where I realised, look, you know what, I'm doing anywhere between 25 to 30, PT clients a week, and then also then trying to work 20 hours a week, to pay for my rent, etc.,
Nice.
and coaching classes, etc., all week and whatnot, and built kind of like somewhat of a, a little bit of a small reputation in the local area, as somebody who was hopefully, a decent coach. I thought, well, if I'm paying X amount a month on rent to the gym in order to use the space, then how much can I get a small unit for? And I'm a big advocate of, I've had people come to me since then and say, I want to open my own space. What would you recommend? How did you do it, etc.? And I just think you want to kind of make it as stress-free as possible, unless you've got kind of like an endless money pit, or a big backer, or you've got help from parents or whatnot. But even still, then I think.
Why would you go down the route of stressing yourself? It's funny, I did the similar thing. I opened up at the bottom of a barber shop. Yeah. So he had a free space, and he was like, I want 200 quid a month for it. Yeah. I was like, I'm paying a lot more than that in rent.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was obviously a smaller space, so by the time I'd bought that, and then I just kept on increasing how much equipment I had, so much to the point where I was like, actually, no, I need to actually get a bigger space.
Yeah. And I think also, it's just human nature is that, generally speaking, people would rather go to, or I feel like, at least in terms of they'd rather be when it's a smaller space, if you get 6 people in a small space, it feels busy, there's an atmosphere, whereas if you get 6 people in a huge space that could house 25, 30 people, then it feels empty, if you will.
It's like that private, exclusive kind of feel, isn't it?
Yeah.
I would support an independent coffee shop over a Costa or something. Yeah. And it's that same sort of feeling, it's that exclusivity. But just going back to something you said earlier, and actually only kind of found this out off pod, but you did a degree in fashion.
Yes, yeah.
And you were working towards that, so what was the dream with that then?
So originally I started out and I was unsure of which way I wanted to go with it, whether I wanted to go this is kind of previous to that. I knew from a young age that kind of I wanted to be successful financially, and the kind of 2 options that I went down when I went through to then college was, do I want to go down a kind of a more, because I'd always been interested in kind of investing and finance and just general things kind of money and making money in general. So I was like, do I go down kind of the investment banking route? So my A-levels were maths, economics, and then art and history of art. So it's kind of the opposite ends of the spectrum, if you will. So I was either going to kind of go down that route and go kind of all in on that and try and, get into kind of Oxbridge, for example.
Wow.
That was kind of, it was something that I would have loved to have done, or that would have been that, if I was going down that route, that would have been something I would have really strived towards and kind of pushed for. And then if I hadn't have, or then the other option was then to kind of right, okay, I can either make money pretty guaranteed by doing that, but I'm not 100% how much I'd love the day-to-day job, or I can make money by having my own business within the creative space.
And doing what you love.
And doing what I love. So I thought, well, you know what, I can potentially do the investing stuff on the side, and I'll at least give it a shot, trying to do the business side of things and doing something that I love. So I went down the more creative route. Did a year foundation course in art and design at Leeds, which generally is something that you have to do to get into the kind of the best or the better design courses, is that kind of foundation. So we did that, and then got into a couple of unis in London and then into Manchester, and decided to go to Manchester because I'd already been in London for a couple of years for college. So then I decided I wanted to kind of be back up closer to home for uni. So yes, I did the 3 years in Manchester on the design, fashion design at Manchester, specialising in menswear.
And you can really see that in your branding, can't you, and the clothes you kind of produce for the gym?
Yeah, so I think at first, coming out of uni, launched the brand straight away. I got a couple of, minor within that kind of in that space, minor notoriety for a year or two in terms of upcoming brands in the UK. But like I say, not on a large scale. I'm not trying to toot my own horn there. It was very much kind of on the there's like Highsnobiety, Hypebeast, kind of online websites like that was featured by. I won a competition with Highsnobiety for Under the Radar Brand of the Year.
Oh wow! When was this? 2019? Before
17 was
17.
I think that just popped in my head. 17, so I might be wrong there. You probably be able to
6
find
years ago.
it, but I think something like that. That was like almost immediately out of uni.
Did that feel a real big success?
Yeah, it was cool. Yeah, it was good. Yeah, so that was so I kind of I don't know. I think obviously it was I think, but because it never feels as much of like a surprise when you're in it.
Yeah.
Now looking back, you're like, all right, okay, that was quite cool. Yeah. But I think when you're doing it and you kind of like in the day-to-day of it, you kind of like, you feel that you deserve it, but it's more kind of like you put the work in for that to be the case, if that makes sense. University for me wasn't your typical university experience. It was out for maybe a couple of nights a week, but I'm not a huge drinker, and it was more, uni days. I don't know if people can sometimes underestimate a fashion course. I think they think it's a bit of a cop-out subject, but it was a 12-hour day every day at uni, wow. 8 till 8, and then I'd be going to the gym after there, and then only getting home kind of 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and then up at 7 to do it the same again the next day. So I've always like had that work ethic of like wanting to be successful, if you will, and that's kind of come from like a young age, and then coming out of uni so got did the thing with Highsnobiety, had a couple of years, that first year I had a showroom in Paris and in New York. There was no like runway show, if you will, but we had a showroom there, so I was able to show to buyers there from kind of like around the world. At one point I think I had about 8 stockists. Wow. For the brand. And that was kind of when the brand was probably at pretty much its peak, if you will. Yeah. So we had kind of 8 stockists, and I was also selling online as well. But not being from money or not having any kind of sort of financial backing, the cash flow can be quite difficult.
Tough. Yeah, it's really tough.
And not to get into the ins and outs of it, but you have markups and different things like that. So
MOQs. Yeah,
and exactly. Yeah, so not just in production, but also for stores. Say for example, if to bear this in mind when you're buying your stuff from Selfridges, big kind of like department stores and just stores in general, they'll kind of mark up from wholesale price 2.5 to 3. Jeez. So if you're if you buy a jumper in whatever shop for £100, they bought that jumper typically for somewhere between like 30 and 40 quid off the brand, if that makes sense. So then for the brand to kind of cover their expenses and stuff like that, they've got to be able to make that jumper for probably 15 quid at the most. Which is
crazy.
And then for it to then be sold at 100 quid, if that makes sense. Whereas if you're, and as a new kind of, the hard part was getting stuff made cheap enough while still having good quality, but then not being able to sell it for that expensive because you're a new brand, nobody knows about you, etc. So you might say, well, I just want to sell my jumper for 40 quid, but you'd have to be able to make it for like £6 or something, which is just not doable, without getting 1,000 units made in China. So it can be a difficult game, but played that for a couple of years and then got into the PT and more as like a means to an end, really, in terms of just like originally I'd always trained, I'd been in the gym from a very, very young age, and it was something I enjoyed, and it's something that I kind of found as kind of almost like second nature. And it was more of like a way for me to make money whilst I grew the clothing brand, and then over time I actually started to enjoy PTing more than running a clothing brand, which kind of led the gym side of stuff to take a bit more of a priority.
Guys, I hope you're enjoying this podcast with Jacob. We're just going to take a quick break and we'll be back in a minute. Welcome to part 2, guys. And we were up to discussing Jacob's, obviously, transition from fashion into working in the gym environment, becoming a PT, but I wanted to touch on that work ethic. Where did that work ethic come from? Because I think that's what sets you aside. Would you agree?
Potentially, I think I've always tried to work hard. I think maybe not even tried to work hard. I think it's just kind of like something that I've just, maybe a little bit instilled, to be honest with you. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have a lazy day here and there like we all do, but I think I don't necessarily notice that I'm working hard, if that makes sense. Or you could, whether I'm working hard or I'm just working a lot, I don't know. But I think it's hard to say it without kind of, I think it's just second nature almost. I think it's just something that I've always done. I've always kind of like, because I want to succeed, and it's kind of something that's been a big part of me for a long time. I do think there's kind of like working long hours and kind of never necessarily like switching off has just been something that's kind of like been instilled with me. And I think you don't always notice that that's how you are until those closest to you, whether it be family or, my partner now and stuff, will sometimes like, God, just like switch your brain off for a minute, if you will. You're always like thinking about this or talking about that and this, that and the other and stuff. And I do think that's just something that it's just maybe just how I'm wired.
100%. I know. I remember my other half said, "You're like my dad. You literally just work every hour under the sun," and I just really enjoyed it. I never knew anything else, whether it was like practicing for cricket, which I wasn't very good at, but I would just put everything into it. When I was powerlifting, just put everything into it, like work really, really hard. I always think, talent will always get beaten by hard work as long as you are working so hard. And I think obviously you come from that same sort of background, but one of the debates in my family all the time is, why do you work so hard? Where does that dedication and drive come from? Is it intrinsic or is it extrinsic? How do you think you're wired, and why do you think you're wired like that? Does it come from your upbringing, or is it just in you? Do you see resemblances in your siblings?
Yeah, I think it's probably a combination of the two, to be honest with you. I think sometimes we try, and just in life in general, I have this thing where I think it's very common for people to try and kind of like offer simple solutions to complex problems, if you will, where and not even just that, but this is like, I think that question there isn't necessarily black or white. I think it probably is a little bit of both, and I don't mean that as like a cop-out answer. I think to a certain extent, I think it's grown from like a young age. I think I've always been involved in sport from a very young age, and I think that competitiveness and that kind of competitive nature has been like bred into me from a young age. From that side of things as well, I've always had that kind of drive and that will to win, and that's just kind of like passed over into business as I've kind of gotten into that and grown older. I also think from my parents as well, I think just maybe, I had a great childhood. There's nothing wrong with my childhood whatsoever, but I do, having like a working class background and then kind of being surrounded by people who did have money, if you will, or definitely just maybe more than what we had. I always had that kind of like will and looking, well, they have that, we don't have that. My parents gave us everything that we wanted in terms of within their kind of, possibility.
Everything you needed.
Yeah, exactly. Everything we needed, if you will. And they kind of showered us with love and this and the other and everything we needed in that side of things. But then seeing others who did have more and whatnot, I think it was always just kind of like, my thing was when I was older, I always wanted to be able to say, right, I can leave, just take it to that next step, if you will.
Nice.
And speaking to my dad about it, he always had that thing where my mum was probably a bit more where she would just love us no matter what.
Yeah.
And my dad would love us no matter what, don't get me wrong, but in terms of kind of like
ambitious.
Yeah, he was kind of probably a little bit more like, maybe a little bit more pushy in terms of like saying, right, okay, trying to push it to that next step, if that makes sense. So there was probably a little bit of that, and maybe he has kind of taken himself a bit further on than kind of his own upbringing, and then my now thing is I want to take it that next step, and then hopefully my children in the future will take that next step further again. So I think there's a little bit that's kind of been bred in from like a young age, and then I think some of it is learnt behaviour from sport, and then also just through that kind of passed on to like, I don't know, in a non like I don't mean this but I've always I want to be the best at whatever I do, if that makes sense. And I mean that in the best way possible in terms of, and I know that's not necessarily going to be the case, and it certainly hasn't been the case.
No.
But through school and whatnot, I think whether it was English and maths, or whether it was sport, or whether it was art or whatever,
you just wanted to be the best.
Yeah, I was like, I tried to be, whether I was or I wasn't, which in most cases, I probably wasn't, but would try to be, better than what I was. And then I think through that, I ended up getting going into, we spoke about college briefly before. I went to got a scholarship to a college down south.
Oh wow!
Went Eton College.
Oh wow!
So I did a sixth form scholarship there for 2 years. So I kind of was just went to school locally, and then because like I say, not being from a working class background, it was definitely a scholarship or nothing sort of situation. Went after that, managed to get into there and did 2 years there for sixth form years, and I think that really was where the kind of, I think the will to work hard and the competitive nature was already there, but I think the getting used to working long hours, I think really came from there, from my time at Eton. I think up until that point, I definitely had, did a normal school day, and then I might have I normally had sport of some form, whether it be athletics or football, rugby, etc., whatever, after school every day. But I think then when I was at Eton, that was my time where I really realised like how much you can do in one day, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you saw the potential that you could reach in one day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think also it was very humbling as a situation. I think that's kind of what brought me into the real world a little bit. I think locally or when I was at school, I think it's very easy to be kind of like
be one of the best.
Well, just be almost like you're a big fish in a small pond, if that makes sense.
That's
and
exactly
I don't
where
mean
I thought
this
it was going.
in an arrogant way, but I think you might be the fastest, or you might be the best at one particular thing or whatever, or one of the best, if you will, and then you kind of go to this place where you've got people coming from all over the world who generally are the smartest in the school that they've come from previously, or they were the best at sport, or they were best at X, Y, and Z, and all of a sudden you're kind of like bang in the middle, if that makes sense, and it's like you're no longer in the top sets, you're now all of a sudden just a pretty average student from an intelligence standpoint. You're not the fastest, you're not the this, you're not the that, if you will, and I think having both sides, one helped breed confidence, and then the other helped kind of ground me the sense of reality of like, look, you know what, if you want to be the best on the big scale in terms of like on a national level, or you want to really be able to push something kind of beyond just like your local town, it's like, right, okay, we need to raise the game a little bit here and kind of like put them extra hours, and talent will only get you so far, and like you said before, work ethic outbeats talent every single time.
100%. But a couple of questions on that. First one being, how daunting was it to move down to London and go to Eton at 16? And the second question is, how did you deal with being, as you put it, bang average?
So first one, it was difficult moving away. I think a lot of my peers there and my friends, down south, they'd been in boarding schools since they were 8 or 9. All the brothers were in boarding schools, etc. And it was kind of like they went to Eton when they were, I think it's 13 to 18, because they do years a little bit. It's a little bit different in the independent schools, but. So they were all very much used to it, if you will. So, but for me, living away, I'd never lived away from home. I don't think I'd been outside of Preston for more than 2 weeks, and that was on holiday with family. So, never been away from parents for probably more than a few days at a time, going on like camping trips with friends. So I think it was a bit of a shock to the system, and it's very easy to kind of like be quite gung-ho and be like, I'm going to go out there, get after it. I'm, chasing my dreams and all this sort of stuff, and then the reality of it is that it's quite lonely, and especially you're going into a group, you're moving into it. We spoke about moving into a gym where people know each other, but this was moving into essentially a house where people know each other, and they've been living together for 3 years already, and then you're kind of coming in as an outsider, if you will, and I'd say probably, I think it was, they do kind of you get like a weekend break every 3 weeks. So I did 3 weeks there, and then we came home for the weekend. And then when I went back, I remember ringing my mum, I think it was like the Monday night after the first day back, and I was like, I'm not so sure if I can do it. I might want to come home, and I'm missing home and getting to see all my friends. They were just having so much fun at the local college and going out and exploring life and whatever. And she was like, stick it out through till half term, see how you feel. But if you want to come home, you're more than welcome to.
Great advice.
We can get you into Newman and stuff. Just see how you feel for another few weeks. My dad said much the same. Anyway, over that next period, getting more ingrained into the social scene there, and it wasn't as bad, and then another couple of weeks and it wasn't as bad, and then before you know it, you settled in, and you're
loving it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think it's just like anything, putting yourself into an uncomfortable situation is only going to be kind of like it's only going to be uncomfortable for so long, so you will just adapt.
Yeah, and that's the whole point of training. You kind of put yourself in an uncomfortable position, increase the load, you adapt, and then you can become comfortable again. We add some more load, and that's life, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
You get yourself into uncomfortable positions. People say to me, Dec, how do you do the podcasts and the YouTube? And ultimately, it was very hard to start with, and then over time, it just gets easier and easier. Like anything, when I first started PTing, I found it really difficult. I was a terrible PT. I've talked about this many a time on the podcast. I thought everyone had to squat, bench, and deadlift. Mm-hmm. So 16-year-old Dec was getting everyone to squat, bench, and deadlift, even if they didn't want to. So I was awful, but you get better because you just adapt, don't you?
Of course you do, yeah. I think it's a very common thing for what you've said there about PT, and I think for whatever the latest fad is or whatever you're doing in your own training, to be like, this is the thing that I need to get all my clients to do. So I don't think you're on your own there. But I think, the thing about starting off, you're never going to be the best. I think it would be unreasonable for you to think that on your first day as a PT or your first day at a new school or your first day at a new job that you're going to be, like say first day at a new gym, you're not going to be mega comfortable, best friends with everybody. You can do everything on the class straight away. It would be probably unreasonable for you to expect that.
Definitely.
And I think just like anything, you've got to earn it. It comes with hard work. It comes with just time and
repetition.
Reps. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, reps.
How did you deal with being average then?
I think it was probably a shock to the system at first, and I think I remember when I first went in there. I was quick, so I was quick relatively. I was never going to be in the Olympics, but I think I was quick for like on a local level and whatnot. And I think when that kind of went down there, and I was like a reasonably big lad, and then kind of running, pretty much 11 flat in the 100 and whatnot, and then being quite a big rugby school, they were like, he's this size, he can run this fit quick.
Let's throw him out on the wing.
Yeah, straight in with the first 15, rugby team and stuff like that training, and then they realised I couldn't play rugby.
Couldn't catch an egg.
Well, coming from like a state school, they don't really I'd played a bit of rugby because one of our teachers at my school around here was into rugby, so they'd kind of like, we'd started like a bit of a school rugby team, but it wasn't like a formal rugby team, if that makes sense. It was mostly just like the strong and fast lads that went into a team. So then kind of going into that, and then I actually got dropped then to the thirds and fourths. It was like the first and seconds trained together, and then the thirds and fourths trained together. And I think I got dropped to the thirds and fourths until they said, go there, learn how to play rugby, and then come back. In the end, I never did, because I was getting just banged and beaten up, and the part of my scholarship was athletics. I went in as captain of the athletics team.
Oh wow!
So it was, and I got kind of like special privilege to go and train with the local athletics club outside of school hours.
Oh geez.
So that
must have been good.
Yeah, well, that was like in the evenings outside of school time on top of my school workload. So trying to then train rugby during the day and then going and doing like athletic sessions at night when you've been, battered by 16 stone lads all day. It was never going to be, it didn't work out too good. So we stopped the rugby before there was any kind of major injuries, and I focused on what I'd kind of gone there to do, if that makes sense. But yeah, general, like say in academics, I think I would say, I don't know, in all honesty, I think as on the whole, my time at Eton was definitely a positive, and I'm glad that I did it. I would say in terms of the kind of going in and being average, I think that it depends on what your motivators are as a person. And I do think one of my probably negatives, and I would kind of openly admit this, is that I think I do seek adulation and like positive reinforcement from people, if you will. So like I like to be told that I'm doing a good job. Does that make sense?
100%. That's not common though, is it?
That's probably fairly common, but I do know it's something that I'm kind of aware of with me, if that makes sense.
Well, you talked about your childhood, about your mum and dad showering you with love, and that's the same thing, isn't it? You wanted to be showered with love, and when they made you the captain, that filled you with confidence, because you might not have been as confident if you weren't captain, for example. And it's the same with rugby. That moment they dropped you from the first and second to the third and fourth, you're probably like, nah, it's not for me.
Yeah,
because you only want to go there if you can be the best.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely something that I've had to face in life. And I think the older you get and the more exposed you are to the world, I think you realise, look, the reality is that you're not going to be the best at everything. I think I've definitely kind of come to terms with that. But I think going from a young age, I think it's that balance of like, I've definitely had to kind of overcome that, just because I've not throwing your dummy out the pram sort of thing, like, oh, I might not be the best at something, so I'm just going to quit it, if that makes sense.
I've been down that route.
Try and find something else. And I think that's a kind of a common thing that people can go through, but it's reality also almost. And I think that's what kind of drew me to CrossFit ultimately in the end, to kind of come full circle, was that it felt like a home for people who were quite athletic, but weren't the best at any one thing, if that makes sense, but they quite like to be just like good at everything but not the best at anything, if that makes sense.
That resonates with me, because I went because I really like being rubbish at something and getting good, and I'm a long way from getting good at all the gymnastics side of stuff, using anything to do with rings or a bar, handstands, all that sort of stuff. I'm really enjoying it because I'm really bad at it. Mm-hmm. So I think that's kind of on the same line as what you were discussing.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like what I was saying there, I think you can come into it, and I think because there's always so much to learn, and there's always so many, it's almost like, say for example, if all you do is, I don't know, run, for example, if you're, so say because I came from like an athletics background, so that was my main sport growing up. If my only measure of whether I'm improving is my 100 meter time, for example, if I don't PB that season, for example, then the reality is like, in theory,
is it a failure?
Yeah, I've not got better that year. I've not improved, and it's very easy to be kind of demotivated by that. Whereas within CrossFit, I think because there's so much to get better at,
you're going to PB in something.
Yeah, you're going to get better at something. Yeah. So whether it be, every time you come into the gym, you're almost going to be, you might be doing a different thing, and it's kind of like organized chaos in terms of across the week, you're learning so many different skills and working on so many different strengths and weaknesses that it's almost inevitable that something is going to get better. And I think that's why people can get quite addicted to it, is because it's just that like you're kind of learning new things all the time.
That
like,
need to get developing.
Do this that I couldn't do that last week, and you do get beginner gains sort of thing where we talk about first wave, second wave, and third wave adaptations, and because there's so many new things to do within CrossFit, you're almost like, unless you're doing it all the time, you're kind of like constantly in them first wave and second wave adaptations, so you're seeing them results all the time, so it's quite rewarding.
I can imagine, like, as you get to a higher level, there's much smaller percentages of increased ability, like anything. But for anyone listening, if you're like struggling with that whole concept of kind of being average, or going from the big fish in a small pond to a small fish in a big pond, I really struggled with that. And I always remember someone telling me, a really good mentor, he was like, but Deck, is it the journey you enjoy, or is it the kind of the whole getting to the top of the mountain? And that's where Fitasylum came from when I used to have it, and it was a mountain, was because it's all about getting to the different peaks and setting yourself new challenges. And the thing I miss most about powerlifting isn't competing, although I loved it and it was one of my favorite things about it. It was the people. It was the going in 4 times a week to see the same people in the gym, and these people I've been training with for many years, and I absolutely love that. And I think that's what, coming full circle, makes Kane so successful, and just such a good gym to go to. And just the environment is amazing. But like, what does 2020 hold for Kane? Like, what is the plan for Kane Training? Is there a big goal that you have in mind for it for next year?
So generally speaking, like I say, we've got into the bigger space now. My only sole goal this year was just to grow the gym as it is now. I'm constantly getting asked, are you bringing the clothes back? Are you going to do online? Are you going to do X, Y, and Z? And I think the kind of the further you get on in business and in life, I think the more opportunities come your way and the more distractions almost kind of keep coming at you. And I think you can kind of it's very easy to stray off the path. So I have to kind of bring myself back to the path all the time. And the goal this year was to just kind of grow the gym, get as many people in there as possible, and let as many people know about it, and really refine the product. So we can say, right, okay, really looking at a gym and what does a gym offer. We've got, first and foremost, coaching. The product is the coaching, if that makes sense. And
definitely.
You could say coaching / programming. If the programming's good, the coaching's good, then we know, is the product good? And that's something that I've really tried to focus on. We've taken on a couple more coaches this year, and we'll continue to do so, reinvesting into kind of coaches education. We've put 3 coaches through the CrossFit Level 1 in the last year, in the last 12 months. That in and of itself has been like a big thing. And then, looking forward now in the next year, me wanting to get my Level 2, moving on into that next step, and then, seeing if any of the other coaches would also like to do so, and just kind of keep constantly educating and kind of bringing our knowledge base so we can kind of keep improving the product down on the floor. Equipment down on the gym, as you know, I'm a bit of a equipment whore, so to speak, so I'm a really big fan of, just like, I wanted from day one the gym to be the best offering in terms of, from a just best in class across the board. I wanted the aesthetic of the gym to be good, so that was never a question, and the equipment to be the best in class, the best that you can get out there. Both in terms of it actually doesn't end up being that much more expensive in the long run, because you'd have to replace it half as much.
Nope.
Because if you go to the best, it's going to last a lot longer as well. And also, when people come in and they see that, I think also, it looks nice and it's a nice place to be, but also I think people respect it a lot more, and B, I think kind of almost like excellence breeds excellence. I think
Definitely.
when you're in that environment, that kind of makes you want to get more out of yourself, if that makes sense. And then obviously there's the side of things of then like the community side, and then which comes essentially from the members, and really kind of fostering that sense of supportiveness, kind of stuff inside and outside of the gym as well. So that's been the real focus for 2023 so far, and kind of really trying to grow that sense of community alongside the education and the equipment and whatnot inside the gym itself. For 2024 going forward, more of the same, but also hopefully bigger and better. We've got some quite exciting plans in terms of potential expansion. So we're still just kind of got that in the works now, nothing too concrete, but just kind of doing some plans around that, looking into that there. But there's more to come on that soon, so you can keep an eye on the Kane Training Instagram for any announcements around that. But hopefully just bringing more and more people to the gym, and applying them same principles that we've done all along of like, get the current offering. We want to say, right, okay, let's get as many people in as possible, fill it, and once we get this people and everybody's happy with the service, they're happy with the quality and the experience that they're having, then expand, and then we can bring more people in. Expand that offering.
And definitely, so ultimately, guys, what I'm taking away from what Jacob has said is the ultimate pillars of success for Kane Training is the high quality coaching, the high quality environment such as the equipment, and then constantly looking to reinvest, progress. Like every time you come, there's usually a box from Rogue, and it's like, oh, what's that? Because as a customer, it makes you think, I love that he's reinvesting, because it feels like your money is going to something, which is reinvested and new equipment, and it's exciting, isn't it? We all love that box from Amazon, the delivery, whatever it is, and when you get to the gym and there's loads of boxes, like, oh, what toys have we got to play with?
Exactly.
So it's quite cool.
I think that's one of the big things as a gym owner, is like realizing that the gym's money is not your money,
yeah,
if you will. And I think it's like a case of like, look, first and foremost, I think any money or any profit that's left over at the end of the month, I think hopefully I'd like to think at least that the members appreciate that my first priority is reinvesting in them first before I reinvest in
100%.
myself. And whether that be in the case of, education, courses, etc., in improving that coaching product down on the floor, or reinvesting in the gym itself, whether it be, the door access system that we just recently had fitted, trying to make that as swish and as nice and as easy a customer experience as possible, or like say the equipment itself, making sure that equipment, basically making it as easy as possible for the customer to get what they came there for, if that makes sense, and the client ultimately has gone there for a great class. What equipment and how can we make kind of the best facility possible that's going to make that easy?
Yeah, I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, the experience you try and make as easy as possible, but also as pleasurable. So we've got a really easy door system if you want to use Open Gym, which I've never seen before, which is amazing, from Kissy, where basically, guys, you can just come in and tap your phone because you're set up, and you can unlock the door and go and train yourself, which I absolutely love. The customer service is second to none. The clothing, the quality is excellent. So again, they're keeping that service and quality high. You can go in and buy your protein shakes, protein bars, waters, whatever you want is there. But just a little funny story on like the customer service is like Meg, your fiance, is absolutely like just so good at customer service, so really good, like just lovely, says hi to everyone. If you need anything, she'll go and get it for you. But recently she started coaching the evening classes, and how strict is she? It's so funny.
She won't take any crap,
right. No, I hope she don't watch this, but basically she did a Monday night on a 7. It was the first time she's ever coached, and she was so good, but she was so strict, and obviously she's like a petite lady, and you just think, oh god, okay, I'm sorry, Meg.
I'm really sorry.
And then the next day, it was really funny, I was doing a Tuesday class, and I was in the back room because it was really busy, and you were PTing, and your client said to you, like, is that Meg? Like, because she was just shouting at people to like do better and like really encouraging them, and you just didn't expect it, and it just made me laugh so much. And you were like, yeah, that is Meg. Like, you were just like,
imagine living with it.
Yeah, that's exactly what you said.
Yeah, no, she's great. I think that's can sometimes be the difficulty, especially. I think ultimately, if we're to speak plainly, I think as a female, and as like say a petite female as well, you wouldn't necessarily always expect that from her. And I think, but then when you're teaching, because I do think generally speaking, I think the 5 and 6 is a good mix. Maybe more of the girls on them classes, and then I think then the 7 o'clock for whatever reason still a mix. But I think generally maybe have 1 or 2 more lads on there than what we do have the girls on the 7 o'clock class typically. So I think if she doesn't put her foot down and kind of like, right, stop talking, let's get straight to it, get to it.
That's what she was saying, it was so funny.
You need to kind of and it's a bit like,
she's like, I'm not having this talking. And I'm like, I'm sorry, mate.
Yeah, and
so
I think
funny.
it's...
I loved it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that you appreciate it because you're like, oh, hang on a second, I've come here to do a class, not to just have a yabber. So I do actually have to get cracking on with it. But yeah, and I think that's important, is to let the coaches, each of their individual coaches, have their own personalities. Yeah. And I think as an owner, sometimes you can kind of, and especially because I do want the gym to become almost like it's a brand as well, if you will, and I want it almost to be like the service is well known, consistent across the board. You know what you're going to get when you go there, etc. But I do think within that, it's important for the coaches to feel like they can be their own person. Definitely. And that they've got that their own kind of personality within that, where you get in a consistent service and you know what you're going to get. Just like you go to Nando's in London or in Preston,
exactly what
you know what you're going to get. You know the meal's going to be the same. You know the price is going to be the same. You know X, Y, Z. And I do think that's important to a certain extent, but also within that you want the coach, and to keep with the same analogy, the kind of the servers, say for example, if within the restaurant space, they have their own flair, their own kind of pizzazz, if you will, and what they bring to
the way they do something.
It's a little bit different. Yeah, exactly. So you kind of like, it just keeps it fresh, keeps it exciting, and lets you know kind of what you're getting from each individual coach.
That brings me on to what my mentor said. He used to say to me, the way you do anything is the way you do everything.
Yeah.
And guys, I hope you've enjoyed episode 43. It's been amazing. It's nearly an hour long, so it's probably our longest ever episode.
Yeah. I feel like I could keep going.
Honestly, I could talk gym all day, especially with Jacob, such a fantastic coach, fantastic gym owner. And we'll have to get him back on in a year's time to see what has progressed and where we're at with Kane Training. But mate, have you enjoyed the podcast?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, really good.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Took an hour's disappeared here.
I love it, honestly, it's so good. But guys, I hope you have a lovely Christmas and a fantastic New Year, and thank you for listening to all our podcasts.
Thank you.